don't make hearing aids for people who can't hear low pitches.
So the question, I don't know if everyone heard that. So the question was, how about now? Is that better? All right, good. I'm not used to a mic, so apologies. The question was essentially, do the hearing aid manufacturers make hearing aids that can address effectively different types of hearing loss? In her case, specifically low frequency hearing loss. And when it comes to hearing aids are a blank slate. So hearing aids come to us unprogrammed. And so we have to make the hearing aids work the way the individual wants it to work for them. And we have a lot of capability within the software to make adjustments to address volume and pitch. And so hearing aids aren't necessarily made for a specific configuration or type or degree of hearing loss. They really are made for hearing loss, and then the provider has to make the hearing aids do what the patient needs them to do based on how they hear. So it's a great question because you can have the same configuration, the same audiometric information, but have very different settings in your hearing aids because everybody hears differently, right? And so it's very much a subjective experience. And that's why it's critical when you're working with whoever you're working with to give them information about how you're hearing. When we program hearing aids, there's no way for us to know that what we're putting into the hearing aids initially is what you need, what a person needs. And so there's very much a trial and evaluation, fine-tuning, more trial and evaluation, more fine-tuning, so that over time we get the hearing aids working the way the individual wants them to work. So it really is something that it's critical that when you're working with somebody that they know what they're doing, because you can have a great tool, but if you don't have a great provider, you're not going to maximize what the tool can provide. It's a great question. Questions, please. So the question was, can you tell from the audiometric information, from the audiogram, how to program it? Well, certainly it's a baseline. It gives us some information about how to start the programming. When we do a hearing test, how many of you have done hearing tests? Good. If you haven't done one, even if you don't think you have hearing loss, it's critical to get, at the very least, a baseline. I'm going to go a little tangentially here, because when it comes to hearing loss, it's really important to do something earlier rather than later. Because why? That's a good question. Because when it comes to hearing loss, hearing aids are not only hearing aids, they're also the only treatment for hearing loss, for nerve hearing loss. And what they do is they help to maintain the neural coding of information from the inner ear up to the brain and the brain's ability to process that information. And when it comes to processing speech, we want to keep the brain processing the speech in the area of the brain that's designed for that, which is the temporal lobe, mostly the left temporal lobe. And when we start having hearing loss and we don't amplify it, or even for people with normal hearing in a really noisy environment, you'll see people looking at the person's face, looking at the lips, because they're trying to get other information. They're using contextual information. And then once we start doing that, now the brain is starting to process things more in the frontal lobe. And the more we process things in the frontal lobe, the brain says, hey, if you're not going to use this real estate for processing speech, we're going to use it for something else. And we want to keep that processing in the temporal lobe. So when it comes to getting a hearing test, it gives us, honestly, very little information about how a person perceives sound. So they press a button, they raise a hand for a certain pitch. That tells us very little. It tells us the softest sound that they can hear at that particular pitch. And the increments of change that we use are pretty big increments of change. We use 5 decibel increments of change when we're testing. So if somebody presses it at 25, we'll go down to 20. If they don't press it again, then we'll go back up to 25 and confirm that. But that's a big shift in energy. When we talk about decibels are on a logarithmic scale, so every 3 decibels is a doubling of power. So we're more than doubling the power for each presentation. So the audiogram gives us a very little information. When we program the hearing aids should be best practices for programming hearing aids entails using what's called probe microphone measurements. Now what we do is we put a little tube inside the ear that is an extension of a microphone. And what that does is it allows us to measure sound in the ear. So we get information about how that particular person's ear affects sounds. Just like an instrument, like a trombone, when you pull the slide, it's going to make a different pitch. You blow over a bottle with fluid in it, you're going to get a different pitch. Everybody's ear canals have different resonance frequencies and different responses in how the sounds are manipulated as they come into the ear. So we get that information. Then we put the hearing aids in, and then we measure what the hearing aids are doing relative to that hearing loss. So yes, we're going to use the audiometric information, but that doesn't tell us how that person is hearing sound. So it just tells us that we're in the ballpark. Once we're in the ballpark, now we're going to have the patient evaluate for a week or so, come back, fine-tune it, again, come back after several weeks, fine-tune it, so that over time we get closer and closer to how that individual wants to hear. And so yes, we use the audiogram as a baseline, but it really, unfortunately, doesn't tell us a whole lot. And there's really no measurements that we can do that tell us that we've hit the nail on the head. When a patient leaves my office after I've programmed some hearing aids, and anybody who's been to my office and had some hearing aids programmed can attest to this, I don't know how they're going to respond to those settings in very specific ways. And so we know we're in the ballpark, but then we have to have them come back and fine-tune it from there. Did that answer the question about the audiogram? This young lady had a question here first, and then I'm going to come to you.
Okay, you had just said it was important to find someone who knew what they were doing, and I was just going to say, how do you find that person?
That's a very good question. The question, if you didn't hear it, was how do you know that the person that you're working with knows what they're doing? And it's an incredibly fair question. So when it comes to dispensing hearing aids, prescription hearing aids, I'll say, there are two types of dispensers. There are what are called hearing instrument specialists, hearing aid dispensers, and then there are audiologists. So in terms of, and this is not to demean or degrade anybody, but when it comes to the educational requirements for a hearing aid dispenser or hearing instrument specialist, they just have to have a high school diploma, and then they do a 6-month training with either another hearing aid dispenser, maybe an audiologist. When it comes to an audiologist, they have to have a doctorate. And so at the very least, from an educational standpoint, somebody who has a doctorate is going to have, a doctorate in audiology is going to have much more understanding, knowledge, expertise as far as hearing loss, amplification, things like that. But just because they have the doctorate doesn't mean they're going to care to put their knowledge to your best interest. I don't know how I would answer that question in terms of any one specific individual with the same degree, but certainly there are, if you know of people who have worked with particular providers, asking them how they feel they were cared for. It is very much a process, and so even talking to prospective providers, asking them how do they work, how do they care for patients, what's the process. I think that would be something that I would want to ask. I would want my mom or dad to ask how they work. Yeah.
But the intake, you're talking about the intake. Does the audiologist with the PhD, does he do the intake, or is it the high school diploma person who did it?
So I'm going to come to your question in just a sec. So when it comes to, no, it's a good question. So when it comes to, let me actually dig a little deeper. When you say intake, what are you referring to?
Your initial person, the one who's there taking the
Doing the-
information when you've got your earphones on and they're asking you to repeat, is that intake person, the person with the high school diploma and
Gotcha.
6 months?
Yeah.
I
So
doubt it's a PhD.
no. So for instance, so the question is when it comes just to the audiometric testing, who's doing that testing?
That's right.
Yeah. So when it comes to the testing, I do testing. All of my colleagues who have doctorates are doing testing. Every facility, I think, is going to be different. I know that there are some facilities who have hearing instrument specialists that do one aspect. Maybe they do the testing. Maybe they even do the programming, and the audiologist, if they are on staff, will do something at a higher level. In our clinic, we just have audiologists. We do not have hearing aid dispensers. There are clinics that just have hearing aid dispensers. So it is something, and there are good hearing aid dispensers, there are bad audiologists, there are good audiologists and bad hearing aid dispensers. Simply from an educational standpoint, though, that's the answer I would give in terms of it. At least I would always recommend going to an audiologist, typically. Yeah. Your question.
The difference between nerve loss and bone loss,
Yeah,
isn't there a difference?
there is. So,
Treatment of which,
absolutely. So the question was, what's the difference between what we call nerve hearing loss and the technical term we use is called conductive hearing loss, or bone loss is the way it was referred to. The way sound gets to the brain is, sound is a sound wave, literally. So it's a wave of energy that's coming through the air. That sound comes into the ear canal and it hits the eardrum. And that sound wave starts the eardrum vibrating. It actually vibrates. There are 3 little bones in the middle ear space, and those bones are all connected to each other and connected to the eardrum. So as soon as the eardrum is vibrating, all the bones are vibrating. The last bone is sealed into the inner ear, and it moves like a piston, and it causes a fluid wave to travel up the inner ear, which displaces a membrane, which stimulates a nerve, which sends the impulse up to the brain. So when it comes to nerve hearing loss, we're talking about more inside of the ear. So the what's called the cochlea, or people can also have issues that are beyond the cochlea. But when we're talking about conductive hearing losses, that's literally about an issue conducting sound to the nerve, not the nerve itself. And so you can have hearing loss that's due to the nerve, hearing loss that's due to a conduction of sound getting to the nerve, or a combination of the two, what we call a mixed hearing loss. And when it comes to those 3 different types of hearing loss, we are going to treat things a little bit differently in terms of the amplification. A lot of times people will equate vision problems with hearing problems. One sense, another sense, you have a problem, you put on glasses, you can see 20/20. Why can't people who put on hearing aids hear 20/20, if you will? So when it comes to a conductive hearing loss, that's more analogous to vision problems, most vision problems. Most vision problems don't affect the nerve. It's the eyeball, it's the way light hits the optic nerve. Most hearing problems, it is nerve related. And that's more analogous to macular degeneration or some nerve-related issue. And as you probably know, when it comes to macular degeneration, we can't fix that problem. You can't put glasses on someone and they're going to see 20/20. So nerve hearing loss is more analogous to macular degeneration. So conductive hearing losses, they're pretty easy to address, actually, because we just need to overcome the blockage of sound getting to the nerve. The nerve is healthy. As soon as it hits the nerve is going to do what it does normally. But once we have nerve damage, there's a fundamental change in the way the nerve is coding information to the brain. There's distortion being added. So certainly talking to kids, sons, daughters, grandkids, get them to prevent hearing loss from happening in the first place. Because you don't want to have to treat hearing loss after the fact. You want to prevent it from happening in the first place. So if you're thinking about getting AirPods or something they're going to be listening to, talk to them about it. You know, make them do some research. Have the parents do research, because it is going to be something that unfortunately can affect them quite a bit. They talk about statistically I think it's about 25% of kids are having hearing problems nowadays, which is crazy, right? We think of hearing as an older person's issue, right? It's not. I mean, it affects everybody. But one of the biggest things that we can do to prevent hearing loss is protection. And so when it comes to nerve hearing losses versus conductive hearing losses, generally speaking, conductive hearing losses are pretty easy to address.
So I have several friends who have hearing aids, and they've gotten them at different places.
Mhm.
If they were to come to you or to an audiologist, would they be able to work on and make those work better for them? Or do they have to go back to where they got them, you know?
It's a great question. So if you didn't hear the question, if you've already gotten hearing aids somewhere and they're just not working well for you, can you go to somebody else to get them worked on? Generally speaking, the answer is yes. Depends on the manufacturers to some extent, depends on where you got them to some extent. But generally speaking, yes, you can. It's something that, for instance, we work with all the major manufacturers. There are definitely some providers that only work with one manufacturer, and they're usually owned by that manufacturer. And so one of the reasons that we chose not to do that sort of thing is because we know that one manufacturer's product really can't address every person's problem. And I'll even go a little bit further and say that one manufacturer's sound processing may be better for your brain versus another for your brain. And so that's part of the expertise that you're leaning on when you're getting new hearing aids. But if you already have hearing aids and you wanted to get them working better, it's quite possible that you could go to somebody else to get them working better. Yeah. Yeah. Other questions? I'm going to come to you first, and then. Yeah.
There are all these ads now for over-the-counter hearing aids.
Mhm.
They don't call them hearing aids. They give them some euphemism, but they're hearing aids. But they're a whole lot cheaper than the prescription ones. So what is the difference? Do they work?
Okay, so this is a great question. So as you all probably know now, there are over-the-counter hearing aids, right? Now, over-the-counter hearing aids are hearing aids that are strictly limited to people with mild to moderate hearing loss, first of all. So in terms of the degree of hearing loss, if you have hearing loss beyond that, they're really not capable of helping because they can't provide the amplification required. Okay. Now, hearing aids, as I said earlier, only work as well as they're made to work for that individual. Okay. So in terms of these over-the-counter devices, let me back up. When I talk to patients about hearing aids, I often will say we don't sell hearing aids. We sell hearing healthcare because the hearing aids are a tool. They're one part of the tool that we use to help people. It's a big part of what we do to help, but it's only one part of what we do to help people. Now, that tool, if it's not maximized for that individual, it's not going to provide the benefit that it could, right? And so with over-the-counter hearing aids, you are buying healthcare, you're just buying your healthcare. The tool itself, they're not great right now. There's a few that are okay, but again, you can have a very good microprocessor, but if the algorithm that creates the settings for that hearing loss, and again, remember that the hearing test is a gross estimation of a person's hearing. If that algorithm doesn't correctly give the hearing aid the instructions to amplify the way that person wants it to, it's not going to benefit them in the way. In addition, when you're talking about hearing healthcare, you need to be taught how to use the hearing aids, how to clean them, care for them. So over-the-counter hearing aids certainly can help people, and we're big proponents of it because the hearing loss population is greatly underserved. And so over-the-counter hearing aids are definitely part of the equation. When it comes to prescription hearing aids, one of the reasons they're so expensive is because you're buying healthcare, right? You're not just buying the widget, you're buying healthcare. And so the level of that care, the accessibility of that care, the expertise of that care will directly affect how well the actual tool works for you in the moment and how well you're supported down the line, because things happen, right? So there are going to be things that need to be addressed by the audiologist, by the provider. And so that's part of what you're paying for. Just like you're paying for health insurance, you don't think about going to get health care when you have insurance, right? I have my insurance, so I'm going to go address whatever I have to address. Part of what you're paying for when it comes to hearing aids is that health care. And so, for instance, Over-the-counter hearing aids are less expensive because you're not paying for any health care. Costco hearing aids. Good hearing aids, a good tool, but the expertise isn't there. So you're not really buying really good health care. You go to an audiologist, private practice, something like that, or even Kaiser, for instance. Again, you're getting good tool, good health care, so you're going to have to pay for it, more of it, more for that. So that's roughly why there's a difference between over-the-counter versus prescription hearing aids, because over-the-counter hearing aids, the tool itself isn't that great, the care is effectively non-existent from an expertise standpoint. Does that, and
Well,
come back with it.
the over-the-counters run roughly $300.
They can run anywhere up to, I mean, from $99.99 up to $1,500 for a pair. Yeah.
And prescription ones at the moment, I believe, are between $6,000 and $8,000 a pair.
They can be upwards of $9,000, $10,000 a pair. Yeah. And again, it depends on what the care plan involves. Like for instance, our most expensive care plan is about $10,000, and it covers the hearing aids. It covers 5 years of everything we do at our office. So for 5 years, everything that you need from a hearing healthcare standpoint is covered. So yes, there is a cost to it, absolutely. I would never argue that. But it is something that we understand the value of both the hearing side of things, but also when it comes to hearing, there's a strong connection to the brain. And so we want to make sure that people are connected socially, but also aging cognitively well. And so that's another aspect tangentially, but it is something, you're not wrong. I'm not saying anything that you didn't just say. They are expensive. But it's not the device that's expensive, it's the care. Like for instance, you can go online and look at some of the high-end hearing aids that you can just buy the hearing aids. You're talking $3,000, $4,000, right? And so, yes, you can get that, but then you're gonna have to take it somewhere and then get it programmed. And that's just to get it programmed. That's not anything about the care going forward.
Okay, my other question, since this is being studied all the time, how we hear, it seems to me that the average hearing aid is an amplifier. It's a microphone, so it makes things louder. My experience, and most people I know with hearing loss, it's not just an issue of volume.
You're absolutely right.
Of course, that's an issue, but I compare it more, it's like being in a room of people speaking another language. You don't get what you're hearing.
Right, the clarity, you're getting volume, you're hearing speech, but you're not understanding, right?
And I don't see that really being fixed.
So I'm going to paraphrase a little bit here, but the question was that hearing aids are basically an amplifier and volume isn't always the issue. And I would wholeheartedly agree with that. Volume isn't, certainly if you don't hear, like if you don't get enough volume, there's no way you're going to understand, right?
No, you need the volume.
So we absolutely need the volume.
You need more than that.
Correct.
And I don't see that being sufficiently addressed.
So I would not disagree with you on some levels. For instance, when it comes to hearing and hearing aids, the limiting factor at this point, I've been doing audiology for 30 years now. When I came in, it was all analog hearing aids. But no, that was the beginning of digital. But I was working with analog hearing aids, which were strictly amplifiers, right? And at that point, the technology wasn't that great, I'll be honest. And when it came to the weak link in the system, the hearing aid at times was the weak link. The ear was able to code good information, but the hearing aid just couldn't provide the benefit. Nowadays, hearing aids are providing amazing benefit if the cochlea can accept and code the information to the brain in the way the brain can use it. So when it comes to, like I was saying before, when it comes to how well a hearing aid is going to work, it depends on how well the hearing itself is going to work. So if somebody has a lot of hearing loss, which means there's a lot of distorted information that's getting to the brain, you're right, that clarity is going to be an issue. Now, hearing aids are improving literally year over year. the latest incarnations of hearing aids are using artificial intelligence to bring more of what we're wanting to hear and less of what we don't want to hear. So for instance, a number of manufacturers have introduced what are called deep neural networks. And these are fancy way of saying that they've recorded millions of sounds, millions of environmental sounds, speech sounds. And the hearing aid can interpret these sounds and identify them as noise and reduce them while maintaining speech information that's nearby. So by virtue of that, you are bringing down the noise and lifting up the speech. Again, there is the limitation. If the cochlea is so damaged, so distorted, that the brain is getting poor information, then the hearing aid really can't help. You're absolutely right about that. And so at some level, we have to go to something different. We have to go to like a cochlear implant. For people who have really, really bad hearing loss, where the normal mechanism for sound coming from outside to the brain is impaired to the point where it doesn't function well, a cochlear implant may be needed. And a cochlear implant bypasses the normal coding mechanism of the ear. And that's why it can help where hearing aids might not help. And so hearing aids, yes, they're amplifiers. They're very sophisticated amplifiers. They have noise reduction. They have directionality. So for instance, if you're in a noisy environment, if you can put the noise behind you and what you want to hear in front of you, it's going to lift what you want to hear above the noise. And by virtue of that, it is going to improve your ability to understand. But there are limitations. A lot of times what we're doing is we're counseling patients, their family, friends about how to speak to somebody with hearing loss, because it's not only their ears, but it's the way people speak. I'm sure anyone who has hearing aids, when people speak fast to them, the rate of speech, it kills understanding, right? Because the quality of information that's getting to the brain is distorted. There are what are called phonemes, these building blocks of speech. And the brain needs a little bit of separation between those phonemes to put them into meaningful units. The way I've learned to speak is I exaggerate my mouth movements, which is good diction, which is important, but it also adds a little bit of extra time between those phonemes so that the brain can put them into meaningful units. It doesn't matter how good a hearing aid is, if a person is speaking fast to that person, they'll just hear mumble. And so hearing aids are hearing aids. They're not a fix. And anyone who sells you on a hearing aid saying it's going to be a fix is selling you something that you don't want. And so there are lots of things that we need to do, both in terms of ourselves, in terms of our hearing loss, but then also in terms of helping others to help us understand. Long-winded answer to that, but yes, hearing aids, they're not a fix. I nearly every day I say, I wish I could do more. Like, if you ever have cataract surgery, boom, it's beautiful, right? You go from blurred to not. Again, that's more to do with the eyeball, the muscle, not with the nerve. We aren't there yet in terms of fixing the nerve itself. Yes, ma'am.
Well, my son-in-law is the one in my, he said, oh, you need to go have your ears checked. Okay, so I said, all right, and the first thing I look for is an audiologist, and then I asked, do they tune it without charge? Is that part of the package that I'm paying for? And so I went to UCSF in Emeryville, and I had an audiologist, and I paid $1,800 for them, and she tunes them, and I go back now again soon, and then I go back again and again, and then if I have any kind of issues, I can go back there. So to me, that was important, was what the package was that I was buying. And I found that wearing them at first, for me, it was a little too loud. Mm-hmm. But she had showed me so I turn them down, and then I turn them down again, and now they're fine. So that's what you buy. You're buying the package.
Right. I often say that patients are buying me. Right? They're buying my expertise, my time. I'll say my time is your time, and it is, right? I hope I'm not in the minority, but I'm always honored that people pay me, trust me, they give me money to help them, and wow, and hopefully all healthcare providers have that same mindset. But it is, you really are buying the provider along with the tool, right? You can't have one without the other. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
I wondered if, I think you answered it about cochlear implants. That's for nerve damage, for nerve loss.
For really severe nerve damage, a cochlear implant becomes really about the only option.
Okay. Now, is the nerve loss progressive?
Yes. So I'm gonna run with that question. Is that the question? Is nerve loss progressive?
All hearing loss, is it progressive?
Yeah, so I'm going to run with that. Yeah, so hearing loss is a progressive thing. It is going to get worse. How fast is it going to get worse depends on the hearing loss, what's causing it, and some genetic factors, probably some other factors as well that we're not going to know. But yes, it's always going to be progressive. Now, hearing aids are one thing that does slow the progression of hearing loss, and that's when I talk about hearing aids as being both aids and treatment. The treatment component is helping to slow the degradation of the neural coding and neural processing. So for instance, I've started wearing hearing aids. Now, I have a very mild high frequency hearing loss. I don't have communication difficulties. The reason I started wearing hearing aids is because eventually I will need hearing aids to really effectively communicate and connect to people. And so that was one part of it. But I also know that if I start now, the results that I'll get 10, 15, 20 years from now will be better than if I waited 10 years. Because if I start 10 years from now, my hearing loss will have degraded, and that starting point will be less than if I had been wearing them up to that point. So it is something that's going to progress. How rapidly? Typically not fast. Like when we're retesting, we have patients come back every year to be retested. We expect that we're not going to see a lot of difference, because typically we're not going to see a lot of what we call threshold changes. When you're pressing the button, raising the hand, we don't see a lot of the volume loss. I'll have patients who I test and they say, oh, my hearing has changed. I know it is. I'm just not doing as well. And I'll test them and their hearing hasn't quote unquote changed. But their word recognition scores may have dropped a little bit because the neural coding has declined a little bit. And so I wish I could do more about arresting that. Hearing aids are the one thing that I can do to help slow that down. And so, yes, it is a progressive thing.
And you must wear them.
Yes, and it's. I'm going to take that statement and run a little bit with that too. So when it comes to wearing hearing aids, I'll have patients sometimes say, you know what, I just wear them. I just wear them when I need them, right? If I'm at home and nobody's home, I don't wear them. We want to make sure that the auditory pathways, the brain, are being consistently and constantly stimulated. Now, you don't need to wear them when you're sleeping, you don't need to wear them when you're bathing, certainly, but the studies show that we want about at least 8 to 10 hours of consistent use to get the full therapeutic effect of hearing aids in terms of that long-term maintenance of neural coding. So when it comes to sound is sound. It doesn't have to be speech. It can be kids playing out in there. It could be cars, traffic, the furnace kicking on. We want the brain to be stimulated. And what's more, when you are wearing the hearing aids, if your brain has been used to hearing all these other sounds, all these environmental sounds, it will know not to pay attention to that. And you're going to be able to focus more on what you're trying to hear because the brain isn't paying attention to these other sounds. When something's new in the environment, a sight, a smell, a sound, our brain has evolved to pay attention to that. Is it fire? Is it a predator? Is it prey? So we've evolved to pay attention to things that are new in the environment. Sound is one of those things. And so if our brain is used to hearing all these sounds that we don't need to hear, when we're in the presence of those sounds with speech, the brain can do a better job of kind of teasing those out. Yes, ma'am.
What about tinnitus? Do hearing aids help it by having you ignore that sound?
So I'm glad you asked this question. So the question was tinnitus and hearing aids. Okay. Now, I'll fall on my sword a little bit. I'm not a tinnitus expert. I often say I know enough to be dangerous. But yes, tinnitus is, does everyone know what tinnitus is? Okay. So tinnitus is a...
You mean
No, not tennis. No. We're,
but that's what I heard.
that's what you heard, tennis instead of
I didn't
tinnitus.
hear her at all. I heard her voice, but I could not understand a word she was saying.
Okay, and I'm going to come back to...
When I talk to you,
Yes?
you need to separate your words. You are slurring them together like many Americans do,
Like right now.
like right now.
Okay.
I separate my words. That is how I need people to speak. They
Okay.
must separate words.
So this is a...
They don't slur them together.
So the gentleman was telling me that I'm slurring my words together. Now, and for his auditory system, that may be true. Okay, this is something that, he says that he talks a little bit slower, and that's what he needs the speech to be a little bit slower for him to understand.
And separated the words. Do not slur them.
Right.
Americans tend to slur them.
So
Yorkman, the rest of us are not hearing what you are. He is not slurring his words.
And that's okay. And again, what I want to, and this kind of goes back to what I was saying about the need for separation between the building blocks of speech, right? And for some people who have a lot of hearing loss, they need the words said like this,
That's right.
right? And you understood all of that.
Yes.
But when I speak a little bit faster, it seems to
I
blur.
understand you now, but your voice changes from time to time.
And some of it may be also the mic, and I'm just not used to it, and I apologize about that. But no, it does cycle back to what I was saying about the need for people to speak in a way that facilitates you understanding. And everybody is a little bit different. For your comprehension needs, you need the words separated with more time.
Yes.
And that's important. And so when you're talking to people, if you're not understanding them, you can help them to help you understand by explaining why that's important for you. So yes,
It's just that when I sometimes call customer service offices, I get a person who talks like that man in the FedEx commercial.
yes.
And I had to tell her, stop, stop, stop. And then after about 5 seconds of saying stop, they finally stop.
Yep. And then you say, you need to slow it down. And then they slow it down for about 15 seconds. Yes. Yeah, they slow it down for about 10, 15 seconds, and boom, they're off and running again. And you have to, unfortunately, you're just going to have to keep reminding them to slow it down. Right. So it is something that, yes, family, friends play a huge part in our ability to understand. And we need to own that we have a health issue. It's nothing to be embarrassed about, nothing to feel less than about. You have nerve damage. If your legs were paralyzed, nobody would expect you to be running. It's a hidden handicap, right? And so we need to help people understand what we need in order to be helped. So I think it is, I'm going to come to you in just a sec, but I think it is something that is really important to spread the word. It's not just, hearing aids are not going to be the fix, right? They're not going to be a fix. There are other things that everybody has to do to make things better. Now, I just want to go back to the tinnitus real quick. I didn't want. So her question was tinnitus and hearing aids. So tinnitus is a subjective perception of sound when no sound is in the environment. Okay? It's some people, it's very mild. Some people, it's devastating. And when it comes to tinnitus, honestly, the medical community doesn't know as much as we would like to know. It's the brain, right? And we don't know as much about the brain as we would like to. And so with tinnitus, there are things that can be done, first of all, and hearing aids are one of them. There are numerous studies that show that hearing aids can help reduce the severity of tinnitus in some people. Some tinnitus is thought to be the brain trying to get more information. There are two types of nerve cells in the inner ear. There are what are called inner hair cells and outer hair cells. Now, the inner hair cells are the cells that send the signal up to the brain. The outer hair cells, what they do is they are internal biological amplifiers, and they also tune our ear from a frequency perspective. And so hearing loss, early hearing loss, is damage to those outer hair cells. So we get the drop in volume, and we're also getting some distortion because the ear isn't tuned as well. Now, some tinnitus is thought to be the brain saying, hey, I need more information. I'm going to turn up the sensitivity of those outer hair cells to try and get that amplification, that internal biological amplification more. And so it's thought to be that that's what's happening. And so when people put hearing aids on, if that is what is actually happening, they'll notice a reduction in their tinnitus because now the brain is getting the stimulation that it wants, turning down the sensitivity of those cells, less tinnitus. Also within, and so for instance, we were just talking about this the other day, is one of the, so in terms of our tinnitus protocols, we have some audiologists on staff who are experts in tinnitus. And part of the protocol is even if you have no hearing loss, but you have tinnitus, we're gonna recommend trying hearing aids because we may get significant benefit just from giving a little bit of amplification, a little bit of gain. The brain says, oh, now I'm getting what I want, and it takes away. We can never promise that we're gonna eliminate it. There's no cure for tinnitus that we know of right now, but there is a lot that we can do. And there's more and more things that are coming online to treat tinnitus. There's something called linear, which is in my view is weird but very cool. It utilizes what's called bimodal stimulation, and what they do is they put a little electrical stimulator on your tongue, and then they play sounds. And with the stimulation of the electrical impulses and the sound, it reorganizes or reroutes those neural signals in a way that most people find that it's no longer a negative, subjective thing, emotional thing.
Do you do that in your office?
So we are not, so we're looking to get that done right now. There's very few linear providers, but we do have one of the premier experts in tinnitus come down from Alaska and uses our office as a home base for once every couple of months to see patients. And so we do have, I would say, access to that. Yeah. I know, it's a really cool thing. Like, how do they even figure out to put an electrical stimulator on someone's tongue, and that would help with tinnitus? So it is something that tinnitus and hearing aids are something that should be definitely explored. Yeah. This young lady.
So where is this nerve coming from and to your ear? Is it coming from the brain or from the spine?
Elaborate on the question a little bit more. When you're saying the nerve, like the auditory nerve?
Yeah.
So the question was, where is the auditory nerve in relation to the brain?
Well, I mean, I'm trying to figure out if you have damage to your cervical spine, is that part of
Gotcha.
the ear?
So the question was, if say you have some damage to the cervical spine, lumbar, something down below say the neck.
Yeah.
So the short answer is no.
Okay.
When it comes to the auditory nerve, there are 12 what we call cranial nerve, major cranial nerves, and the auditory nerve comes out of the cochlea through what's called the internal auditory canal, goes up, hits the brainstem and goes up.
Okay.
And so it's the auditory nerve, the vestibular nerve, and also the facial nerve run through that area.
Okay.
So, so for instance, you may have heard people have, well, this is maybe a little bit esoteric. There's what's called a vestibular schwannoma or acoustic neuroma that people have. Yeah, maybe I'm going to back up from that. What's your question?
No, I was just gonna say, translate that. And my question is, at what point in life, like, would I think I need to have my ears really tested? Like, personally, it's just sometimes I have to put the volume of TV a little higher than my daughter does.
Okay, that is a brilliant question. I couldn't have
At what
planned.
point?
Yes, I couldn't have planned it better. So when it comes to hearing loss, we feel that probably around age 55, someone should get a baseline. Hearing loss, especially when we talk about hearing loss due to aging, taking out genetic factors, other things like that, hearing loss due to aging is really exposure to industrial noise. And when I say industrial, or modern noises, right? And so with that wear and tear on our ears, about 55 is when I would want people to get baselines. Yeah.
I missed the deadline.
Well, happily, it's not a deadline. Yes, it's a recommendation. Now, but I do want to talk about something you just said, though, as well, is that you feel like you need the volume a little bit louder than your daughter, right? So you're missing out on some information that your daughter's getting, right? Make sense?
She'll let me know.
Absolutely. Well, yes, again and again. Now, to me,
Also grossly under-exaggerating, because I've been with her when she didn't have her hearing aids.
No, I don't have hearing aids.
So that's always what you do.
No, I don't. So that's why I was curious, like,
yeah.
no, I don't.
Oh,
No.
you need them.
So this,
I trust her.
now, this is,
We go on outings together.
yeah.
I can tell you who's got hearing loss.
Okay, so this is good information because
Yeah, thank you. No one's ever told me that.
when I talk to patients with their loved ones, I want to make sure that both people are on the same page, right? If one person says, "Oh no, I hear fine," and the other person's like, "No, you don't," something's incongruent, right? And so I'll leave it at incongruent. But it is something that if somebody is, as a young audiologist, I learned that if a parent is worried about their child's hearing, believe them, right? Anybody with kids, if you believe them, because they know that child, right? If people are saying, yeah, you might want to get your hearing checked.
Just sue.
Well, and your daughter?
No, my daughter.
Okay, she hasn't let you know yet. Okay, good. But that's an example.
Smart daughter.
So let me talk just a little bit about what that may manifest as.
Okay.
So say you do need a little bit more volume from the TV, or say someone, can you repeat that? Can you repeat that? Like I was saying, I wear hearing aids not because I have communication difficulties, because I know the prophylactic benefits of it. But especially for that hearing loss that's a little bit of high frequency hearing loss, the most important area for speech understanding in terms of pitch frequency are high frequencies. There's a lot of consonant information in the higher frequencies. And that's the stuff that gives meaning, right? And so if you're feeling like you need a little bit more volume than somebody with, you assume, has normal hearing, probably means that you have a little bit of high frequency hearing loss, right? And it also means that even though you may not have communication difficulties per se, it could mean that your brain is processing more in the frontal cortex, because now you're having to use, you may not quite understand what someone said, your brain says, in this context, it has to be this word. Now that's shifted over to the frontal cortex. And so if you had that information, it would have processed it up here. And so it is something, if that would be something where I'd say, yeah, you should probably get your hearing tested. At the very least, it may be something where in the end you decide, yeah, I'm fine for right now. I always say the sooner you do something, the better. You know, my job is not to sell anything. My job is to educate people and to give them information, let them do with that what they may. Yeah.
Thank you.
I just want to say, my son, he tells me that YouTube changes the volume from one segment to another. When there's commercials, the volume goes up, and it goes back down. So just a disclaimer, because, you know, because I thought that too. I said, wow, you know, I have to turn up the volume. He goes, oh, Mom, YouTube's famous for that. So he sat with me and went through it. So, you know, our young children, not children, young adults, and our children who are young adults can really help us with a lot of that. So your daughter, yeah.
Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
And I could, because I love YouTube, I can also agree with that, because sometimes the person on YouTube has no microphone when they're speaking, or else it's a poor microphone. They don't boost their own volume, so you could hear it better. I'm thinking of my father, who had hearing loss, and his way of solving that was turning up the television louder, so it would blast my mother out of the room. So this was years ago, so I got him a pair of headphones that connected with the TV, so he could hear it directly. But he said, no, those sports announcers, they talk too much. So his solution was to get a little transistor radio and hold it against his head to hear what was going on the television.
Like the old days.
People, right?
I know Americans do. I'm slowing down now, making it louder for everybody, because everyone here needs a microphone when we speak. Americans do speak fast, and everybody else in the world also speaks fast. So I try to adjust, speak slower, raise my low voice to a higher octave, and it helps. Also, when you finish a sentence, sometimes people's voice automatically drops.
It does. I hear that a lot. People will say that I missed the last word of an utterance. It happens, yes.
And some people just need their ears clean too, right?
So, the ear cleaning part, yes. So, ears, so when it comes to ears and earwax is a good thing. Let me say that again. Earwax is a good thing. We don't want to have no earwax, but too much of a good thing can be a bad thing. And when it comes to earwax, if it is something that's occluding the ear in terms of sound, yeah, you absolutely have to take it out, get it taken out. But it isn't something that, generally speaking, it's not dirty, it's not bad, as long as it's not affecting your ability to hear, nothing to do.
And Medicare pays for it, I believe.
It does. I got it.
Yeah, yeah. And there's some ways, in terms of ear cleaning. Right. Now, people who wear hearing aids may have to have their ears cleaned more frequently than people who don't. And that's because the ears are self-cleaning, generally speaking, meaning that there's a kind of a sloughing off process in the ear canal that pushes the wax out. There's an old saying that I learned as a kid, don't put anything in your ears smaller than your elbow. I thought it was ubiquitous, but it may be a Midwestern thing. But essentially it's saying don't put anything in your ears, right? And that's because the earwax is trying to move its way out. People are jamming it back in. Hearing aids kind of work like a Q-tip in that sense, in that they're pushing it back in a little bit. So it may exacerbate that problem. Yeah.
But shower and let the water, with the hearing aids out.
Yeah.
Shower and let the water in the ear, it tends to flush out.
So conceptually, I can understand why you'd think that.
Okay.
The anatomy of the ear is such that unless you're doing this, the water's not going to get very far in.
But when I wash my hair, I do that.
Okay, there you go. It is something that the ear canal rises as it comes into the ear, and so usually if you're just showering like this, water's not going to get very far into the ear. But there are some over-the-counter kits that you can get. Yeah, one's called D-Brox. We carry one called Audiologist Choice, and it's some drops that have hydrogen peroxide in that breaks down the organic material, and then you flush it out of the ear with water. Yeah. Yes,
So
ma'am.
you've given me a lot of tools to have a good argument with my husband over. 'cause-
Amen.
Yeah.
You know, does he,
Trying to get him to do that. He says, I hear what I want to hear.
is he a smart man? Or let me put it this way.
He's-
Does he consider himself a smart man?
Yeah. He's a machinist.
Okay.
So that's probably part of.
Oh, his
why
hearing
he's
loss?
got the
Oh,
hearing
yeah.
loss, for sure.
Oh, yeah.
And he's 83 years old and it's his company, so he still goes to work. You know,
Good for him, but not good for
But
him,
yeah,
right?
Exactly.
Right.
It's good and bad. you
Right.
know, so-
So if he considers himself a smart man, my argument is always the informed decision is the best
yeah,
decision.
And he'll agree with that, so.
So if he doesn't know how he hears, how does he know how he hears? Right? If he doesn't, so at the very least, encourage him to get a hearing test.
Well, we have a neurosurgeon that will just make the appointment for him
Oh,
on my
nice.
request, so. yeah.
There you go. And
That's
again,
what we
it's a hearing tests are a painless procedure. Everyone who's had a hearing test, it's effectively a painless procedure.
Yeah.
Kind of fun even maybe at times. So it's something that you just want to get information. Information, as they say, is power. You do with the information what you want. It's a free world right now for now. Yeah.
Thank you very much. You
Yeah, my
really
pleasure.
Explaining things really, really well.
Absolutely, my pleasure. Yes, ma'am.
How close are we to being able to do hair cell transplants?
You mean like up top? No, I'm just kidding. I was actually just reading about that, and we're still years away. So the question was, how far are we away from actually regenerating the inner hair cells, the nerve cells? And I would say, I'm hoping in my lifetime, but I would say we're definitely 10 or more years away. Now, I don't know all of the research that's going on. That's just a semi-educated guess as to how long. But it's a pretty challenging thing to do, in the sense that you have to find whatever the precursor is to having the cells regenerate. And then you have to find some vehicle to get it to that area, which is a very enclosed area, if you will. You can't just inject something into the ear because it can damage the ear further. And so it's a ways away. I know. Other questions?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Special adaptive telephones offered by the state of California.
Yes. So there's a program called CTAP, California Telephone Access Program, which will give you a free amplified telephone. And in fact, it's not just amplified. If you have vision problems, if you have dexterity problems, mobility problems, they work to try and alleviate that for phone access. It's something that you can get, as I said, free of charge. I think they even deliver it and set it up for you. You just need to have the application filled out. There's a portion that an audiologist fills out. Even I think a physician can do it as well. But yes, it's a free program. Take advantage of it. Absolutely. Yes, ma'am.
There's a gentleman in the back there that's on the right.
Yeah. Yes, sir. Did you have a question?
Well, I got a little one, yeah. Maybe a microphone?
Here you go.
No.
Oh, okay.
No? Okay.
Most of the time, most of us have the impression that amplifiers make the sound louder on all levels. And I don't have that. For instance, when you're standing 10 feet away from me and you're speaking into the mic, I don't hear the T, the twos and the doos and these things that come out clearly. in anybody's speech. So some things are, I guess, smoothed out, some things are distorted. Obviously, not somebody contributing these things, but they're not as loud. And I sort of wondered,
So
is there any speakers which reproduce the sound reasonably well?
So I think the question, and you can let me know if I'm mistaken in this, is that are there hearing aids that can give back sounds that you're missing? Essentially, is that the question?
Yeah.
So the short answer is well, there's no short answer. It depends a little bit on your hearing loss. So for instance, if you have, the t sound or sh, s, those are high frequency sounds. And if your hearing loss is such that the hearing aid can't produce enough volume for those sounds, we can't give them back to you, relatively speaking. Even if we can give them back to you in terms of giving you what we would call audibility, the damage to the nerve may be such that what your brain gets is too distorted to make sense of that information. So it's complex. I'm right there with you in the sense that it is something that we're trying to give back as much of the auditory information as possible. And it may be, do you wear hearing aids, sir?
No.
No. Okay, well, that's one problem. So if you aren't hearing those sounds, in large measure, it could be because the auditory system isn't getting that stimulation, but with hearing aids, it could. Yeah. Have you had your hearing tested?
It seems to me when you're speaking over the speaker, sounds sharply clipped, like to and do and trepidation, they don't come across the same way over the amplification. And therefore, a lot of people, including myself, have problems with your amplification.
With this amplification. So if I was to talk like this is my audiologist's voice.
Much better.
Much better. Okay, I can't, yes. In fact, let me just do this. I'm going to start using my audiologist's voice. So, yes. Now I'm going to ask you that question. Have you had your hearing tested?
Not in 5 years.
Okay. I would strongly encourage it, again, just to have information. You don't wear hearing aids, is that correct?
That's right.
Okay. So, again, to give people information is our job, is to let them know what is possible, where they're at in terms of their baseline, and what to do, what can be done about it. And then the person needs to decide what they're going to do about it.
Yeah, because a loudspeaker from 10 feet away should always be clear, and I can't miss about half the word.
And part of it is I'm not used to talking to a mic, so I'm like this, and so I'm with you. I'm with you. Yeah, the speaker, I'll even kind of relate it to hearing aids, is the amplification system only works as well as it's designed to work. In this case, it wasn't working well for you. A hearing aid only works as well as it's made to work. So again, circling back to what can we give the auditory system to understand, hearing aids are the one thing that we can do. And they need to be made to work well for that person.
Speaking off the cuff, as you do now, is much clearer than any amplification.
Good. Well, I've got a trained audiologist voice. Yes, ma'am.
I have a situation where, for example, here's my phone, it's here, it rings, and I hear it from back there. I do not know where sounds are coming from. Is this common? Is it correctable?
It is fairly common. The question was in terms of if you have problems localizing where sounds are coming from. Is that common? And I would say generally, yes, it is common in the sense that we have certain auditory cues. Some of them are low frequency, some of them are high frequency. Some are related to the pitch, some are related to the volume. And so if you're not getting those auditory cues that tell you a sound is coming from here versus somewhere else, you're not going to know where it's coming from. Yeah. Is it correctable? Hearing aids can help a great deal, yes. Because again, you're missing out on auditory cues. And if we can give you back those auditory cues, both in terms of sound localization as well as understanding, will benefit. Yeah. How are we doing time-wise? We're done? All right. Well,
You've been entertaining.
good, good. I want to thank you so much for allowing me to come and answer questions. It's what we want to do, is we want to educate. Now you go out and educate others, please. It is something, so this is one thing I am going to say. Talk to your primary care doctors. Talk to your other caregivers, because we are all in it together. I want to work with other people's primary care doctors, ear, nose, and throat doctors, physical therapists, we didn't even talk about balance issues. But it comes from a lot of what is going to help is physicians knowing how important healthy hearing is. And you're right, they don't.
They really don't know, which is pretty sad.
It is sad. It is sad. But
Make the appropriate referrals.
they don't. And that's why it's important for you to help them understand. The more they hear it from you, the people they're caring for, they'll take notice.
Do you have cards here for us?
No. Short answer is no. I didn't come here to sell anything.
Yeah, but I don't live in Piedmont, so I, you know.
Well, I don't live in Piedmont. So we are,
Okay.
okay, yeah. So we're Berkeley Hearing Center.
Okay, all right.
So, yeah.
Yeah,
And we'd be honored to help.
yeah. Thank
You
you.
have a card?
No, I do. My apologies. That was the question, and we should. So
Can you write down your contact information?
certainly.
I may want to.
Oh, yeah, we have a card here.
Okay.
Oh, okay. All right. So as long as you don't mind the scuffs. So that's